What up? Seth Miranda here. This is Adorama Rewind, and I am in London, so I'm on the road, and I just wanted to squeeze this one in, so forgive the haphazard setup, maybe some echoing, a little bit of noise from outside, but I wanted to get this one in here and make sure we got everything covered. So let's start off with this one. This company is giving away 100,000 AI-generated portraits for free. Yeah, so this is kind of crazy. We talked about this probably months ago, right? Icons 8 has found a way to have a computer generate these portraits right here. Not all of them are 100% perfect, being that there's 100,000 generated. There's only so many that could be usable, but there are some really high quality ones in there, and they're just giving them away as long as you link back to their site. So if you look over here on their site and you play their video, they'll tell you exactly why they're doing it. Pretty much what's happening here is they're doing licensing-free images. You don't need to pay a model, you don't need model releases, there's no image rights to it that, you know, it's fair use. And you can throw it onto an ad, put some copy over it, and you're good to go. Or if you want to do a presentation or something like that for some people that you're trying to impress, or, you know, you got to hit a boardroom, you now have the ability to do that, and that's kind of crazy, right? So who does this affect? Well, obviously photographers with the stock photography industry, 2 actors or models that did this as quick paychecks on the fly. This is a big deal. So how did they do this? They took pictures of about 69, 70 people over the span of a few years, and they trained a computer by looking at those images how to construct a face, how to construct mannerisms, emotions, and just you know, muscle structures, things like that. Like, it was basically looking at images and thinking, well, how can I do it on my own? And now it's putting out 100,000 AI generated faces. So these people don't exist in theory. I'm sure there's coincidences in there, and you can use these images for whatever you think. This is kind of crazy. Let me know down in the comments what you feel about that. I can only imagine what's going on there. I know I've made plenty of rent money doing headshots, and not that this is headshots for the person that you're shooting. This is more like stock photography. That's who it's going to be affecting. People that would just do like a body of work for like iStock or anything like that, and put it up there and hope that people just buy high quality images off of them to fill the voids that they needed for the whatever they're putting out there, which is usually ads and stuff like that. Speaking of virtual people, a portrait of the back of Banksy's head just sold for $43,650 at auction. So this is what it looks like. And you're going to say, well, how do you know that that's Banksy? Well, it sold at Sotheby's, and they're reputable, right? Actually, it sold at Sotheby's London. Chris Levine, a very well-known British photographer, shot this. I mean, the guy shot Queen Elizabeth II and all these other people, and they're saying that that's the connection. In the end, even if it isn't, I think what you're doing is you're buying the idea that you have a portrait of what could be Banksy, when in fact Banksy may not even be a one sole person. You don't know. I mean, coming from the street world myself, we can think that we know who or what, or that he was in you know, Exit the Gift Shop, but in reality it could be just a collaboration of a ton of people that are just doing a really good job of making this guy exist. Of course he does have teams now, but all that aside, I thought that was pretty crazy. And in a world where people are thinking that images aren't worth anything, is it worth $43,000? You tell me down in the comments. I'm super curious about that. I closed out last week's Rewind by talking about how Sony will be part of Photo Plus Expo in New York. People thought they pulled out, and that was like a big deal because they were like one of the top 3 and it could crush the show. Well, Photokina, which I had the honor of being at last year, which was like the last big one, I got to teach at the Last Lite booth, which was awesome. Thank you, Last Lite. And now they're saying this year, Nikon, Leica, and Olympus are not going to attend the 2020 Photokina. And Photokina is basically saying, they put out this statement right here. They're basically saying, like, look, the industry is going through a massive changes, and this is just one of them. And you know, the trade shows are going to have to evolve and change with it, and we're just figuring things out. But things will go on as planned, and so on and so forth. Does this affect Nikon, Olympus, and Leica? Probably not. I mean, unless they have something that they're trying to announce or show, they probably spent all year paying millions of dollars just put their cameras on a table so people can get their hands on them to see them without like a major release to have a stage platform to announce it on. They probably don't need it, and they're probably saving a ton of money. And for Photokina, having been like this enormous size of what it was, and it was like this legacy to go and see, it seems like it's shrinking, going smaller, and they're downscaling it. So this is probably a step in that direction. Trade shows, again, I go on record, I think they're great. I love seeing what's going on out there. I like seeing the brands, I like seeing the people that are using the gear, I like seeing the philosophies and just the social structure, seeing people I haven't seen in forever. That's kind of my thing. Speaking of trade shows, we were just at IBC in Amsterdam and we got to see this, the unveiling of the 600D from Aputure. So what is this? Well, it's a 600 watt LED monolight with a ballast that could take right here. You see here, it takes 2 batteries in the front and 2 batteries in the back, V-mount. Ted Sims, my buddy over there, was telling me that he can cut it down in half so you could use 2 batteries, and then maybe if you wanted extra power, you could have another one. That would be 2 more batteries. But right now, this is able to fly on a plane. You have a 600 watt LED, and what's so special about that? Well, one, LEDs have gotten better and better when it comes to flicker rates, color, and all sorts of things. They were garbage forever, but now there's less heat, less power draw. There's dimming. Like, you couldn't take a tungsten light and dim it really. You couldn't dim HMIs. Now you can dim LEDs. They're super quiet, and this thing is really small for 600 watts, especially for indie filmmaking. This is fantastic. They didn't go on record about price, but I talked to them, and I'm going to tell you that it's going to be pretty affordable. Although this is in response to DPs out there going to Aperture and being like, yo, you're doing cool stuff. Why don't you make a higher end level of stuff so that we can play with your stuff too? And I still think this one's going to be tangible for the indie world, and I think that's where we're going. Is like more and more things are being in the hands of more people. It's not so much this echelon of giant equipment and giant productions, but more like higher quality productions at smaller levels, especially with like mirrorless hybrid systems fitting in the palm of your hand, doing cinema like the S1H from Panasonic. And speaking about the palm of your hand, the Profoto C1 and C1plus have been announced, and they are actually coming out. The C1, $300, the C1 Plus, $500, and these are basically handheld strobes for your iPhone. However, they do have Air TTL and stuff in them, so they can actually do TTL with the rolling shutter of an iPhone, which is actually kind of impressive. But you know, you've seen the comments. A lot of people are like, what? That much money for a handheld light from my phone when there's other systems out there? Sometimes things just aren't for you. You know, iPhone photography, or smartphone photography, I should say, is not going anywhere. It's really where things are headed and where most people are being introduced to the craft of creating images. And, you know, these companies have to roll with the punches. That being said, I'm not someone that uses my phone for my primary way of creating images, so this isn't for me, but there probably is plenty of people out there, especially influencers, who are like their main job is to create content for their audience, and maybe they're not trained in such a way. Of course, there's other systems, but there's always going to be choices in gear of any sort: lighting, lens, cameras. It's never going to be this one thing from this one company and that's the end all. It never will be, because we all have different workflows and we all have different needs of what we're trying to create out there. So that being said, I thought this was an interesting article. Laugh if you want, but they're pretty much on point. So this is an interesting article I thought I'd put in there, especially for people that are skeptical about what Profoto is doing with this. I'm not trying to defend a brand in any way, but it is pretty interesting when there's that much backlash, and then, you know, that's usually what happens is something gets put out, people hate on it really fast, and then someone comes out and goes like, hey, there had to have been a reason why they put it out. And this article basically goes into saying like just what I just said. iPhones and smartphones in general are not going away, and more and more people are adapting to that instead of a point and shoot or a small SLR. So they and look at what iPhones are becoming, like 3 cameras, 4 cameras inside of one phone. They're more camera than phone now. So people have to start realizing that the industry is going to shift and placate to this a little more, and that's okay. I mean, if they weren't using a phone, they'd be using a point and shoot, and people would be making things for point and shoots like they've always done. So it is what it is, and you know, you can either get upset about it or you can realize where we're at and start assimilating, and there'll always be different levels. There's the point and shoot iPhone, smartphone, there's the SLR mirrorless, there's the large format, medium format, phase 1. I mean, I just showed you a $57,000 phase 1. There are markets for all of this stuff. So let's talk about some social stuff here. This photojournalist rescues a victim of an anti-LGBT mob. So what basically happened is in Ukraine, they were having an LGBT rights event, protest, if you will, and these guys come out of nowhere wearing masks because they're super brave, obviously, and just started stomping out this poor kid. This veteran photographer, Gleb Garanik, I hope I pronounced that right, walked right in, let me just grab, and he grabs the kid and walked him right out of there. And another photographer obviously captured all of this. And here is the same guy who shoots for Reuters. You can see his badge right there, bleeding from being part of another protest and when he was shot that. So this is the question, right? So as photographers, when do we know when the line is of being an observer to a participant? Clearly this guy was like, hey, I got the shots I need. There's plenty of other photographers around. I'm gonna go help this kid. I mean, when someone's life is in jeopardy, you have to decide what's more important, the shot or someone's actual life. This being the case, I'm sure that he wasn't even thinking about the photos after all. He's like, yo, this has gotta stop. This kid is being completely obliterated on the ground. And he was brave enough to get in there and walked him out of there. So let me ask you, what do you think? When do you stop being an observer and start participating in the world around you? A lot of street photographers want that candid feel. They don't want to set things up. They don't want to like coerce people into doing certain things or try to like nudge the scene in a way. So what about you? What do you think? Do you think that sometimes, you know, it's always hands off, you don't ever participate? It's a tricky line. There's a famous photographer and his name escapes me right now, which is terrible, but he shot a man having a heart attack. And it was a famous photo. I think he shot in Mexico. And he was being interviewed one time and they said, well, what did you do after you got that shot of him having a heart attack? He's like, oh, well, I shot vertical. And that was his legitimate response. Like, I'm not a doctor, I'm not anything. I don't know what I could have done for this guy. So I did my job. And I remember years ago when I worked for the BMX magazines, I had a similar moment where a kid crashed in a very sketchy competition and his nose crushed into his face and he had trouble breathing and the whole crowd was around him and I just kept on shooting and shooting and shooting. And what I said, and a lot of those photos got published in Dig BMX magazine actually. And I said to people like, I just did my job because I couldn't help the kid. There's nothing I could have done. There's plenty of people there already like putting a hand on his shoulder and that's not gonna do anything. All we could do is keep him calm until the proper people showed up to help him, like EMTs. And, you know, I did my job of documenting what happened there, you know? So where's your line? Tell me down below in the comments. Let's talk about this guy getting beaten up in Notting Hill Carnival. So this is the guy, this is his camera after he got beat up, a Ricoh GR. And basically what he's saying is he was on the street, he saw a couple hugging in a doorway or on a porch or a steps rather, and they saw him. The woman asked him, hey, did you take our picture? And he didn't want to disturb them. He wanted the candid shot, just like I mentioned. And he basically said, hey, you know, I'll delete the photo, whatever. The guy didn't even hesitate, just started wailing on him and smashed his camera. He didn't call the authorities. He just decided to go have a beer apparently. That's kind of crazy, but he said my camera's insured and he'll live to another day. And that's kind of crazy when you think about how far people are going to just not have their photo taken in a world where almost everybody has a camera on them at all times now. So think about that. If you're a street photographer, when do you feel like you're in danger of something like that? Or how far do you push documenting someone else's intimacy? I know, well, even though it's on a public street, is it intimate? I don't know. Let me know down below. Let's get back to some gear. We'll go back to some social stuff in a bit, but I'm trying to break this one up. So the Sony A7R4 is still a star eater. So what? Yeah, they're basically saying that they didn't fix the spatial filter. What this means is for long exposures, the Sonys have something which is spatial filter, is so that it can reduce noise. So it's almost like if you ever use the older versions of Photoshop and you did the dust and scratches filter, it like swelled up and swallowed the dust particles and made your image a little more fuzzy and stuff. That's basically what these cameras are doing, is that they're trying to like limit the noise for long exposures and lower light, and that's really what astrophotography is. So instead of seeing all the stars, you basically, here I'll show you. If you go to this old article right here, Star Eaters, and it loads up, you can see here that they're showing that it just kind of like murks them out pretty fast. So if you do have a Sony and you're an astrophotographer or you're someone that shoots astrophotography and is thinking about getting a Sony, keep this as a consideration, okay? Let's talk about this guy. So speaking of stars, I thought this was pretty cool. It's not so much news, but I thought this was pretty interesting. This guy sets up miniatures and then he shoots these stars and makes up these like little scenes, which I think is phenomenal. I love this type of stuff. He puts something really in the foreground, so it's like forced perspective. and like little houses and things and ships and all this sorts of stuff to make it look like there's some wild scene going on, but it's really just caught in camera and it's just miniatures. And how fantastic and wonderful is that as far as imagination goes, and just creating things that, you know, are practical, meaning that they're physically there and yet they're completely fantasy. I think that's pretty awesome. There were some other photographers over the years that would cut out pictures from magazines and make them like stand up like they're running through a field and it's like just Legos and stuff. I love forced perspective stuff. I love macro photography. I love creative macro photography. So this is macro mixed with product mixed with Astro, and how could you not love that? So I just put that one down there for fun. Let's talk some more gear. So Huawei unveils the Mate 30 Pro with Leica triple cam, 7,680 frames per second slow-mo. Yeah, so these things are supercharged with Leica branded cameras in them. So they're saying branded, which means that they basically just like paid to license the name on it. There's a lot of heavy specs here, right? So 40 megapixel f1.8, 16 megapixel ultra wide f2.2, 8 megapixel telephoto with f2.4, all sorts of stuff going on here. 3D depth sensing time of flight sensor, whatever that means, all sorts of tech going on in this thing. But there's one, and here we go, the mind-boggling 7,680 frames per second when shooting 720p resolution, which is super slow-mo. 12-hour-long 4K time lapses, full HD, of course, and 4K 60. All sorts of heavy numbers, heavy specs in these phones. The catch: they're not going to be supported by Google. Without being supported by Google, that platform, which isn't going to be iOS, is going to take a huge hit as far as being able to get apps and certain things like that. So they think it's going to be mainly a phone that's going to be popular in China, because coming to the US is going to be an issue when it comes to collaborating or having use of Google as support on that. But the price is pretty interesting. The top end for this is about $1,300. That's the toppest of ends ever. Huawei has been in a lot of heat over the years. They've done ad campaigns with shot by their camera, but then they've on the phone, but then they've shown they were photos from a DSLR. So it is what it is. So last rewind, we talked about Sigma not supporting the Pentax mount anymore. Well, Ricoh just announced a development of a new Pentax flagship APS-C camera. So that's it. That's all they've said. All we know is that the KP is what it's going to be replacing, and that's it. There's no specs, no price, no timeline, nothing. It's kind of interesting that they've decided to push this out there. I think, is it in response to Sigma saying we're like backing off and people thinking that Pentax is going away? I don't know. I know that we have a bunch of Pentax users in this audience. We have definitely heard you guys vocal in the comments over the time of Rewind being around. I thank you for that. So Fujifilm has a really exciting announcement. They went on a live stream and announced the X-Pro 3 with titanium body, hidden LCD, and new film simulations. So yeah, titanium body, which is really interesting because usually you hear about magnesium alloy or aluminum, and titanium is a really hard metal to work with. It retains heat, it's super hard. And they announced it by showing a video of the X-Pro 3 being etched into a new camera body, which is pretty exciting. Pretty much all over the place improvements. The X-Pro 2 is a fantastic camera, but the optical viewfinder on this is going to be more clear, less distortion, larger angle of view. The EVF is going to be brighter, higher frame rate, higher resolution, better contrast. And they've been doing a great job with hybrid viewfinders, I got to say. And this is the interesting part, that the back screen is kind of flipped the other way. So you're not going to be bogged down by thinking about the shot so much, but more like a film feeling camera, which Leica did by removing their LCD screen on the back. But this one is pretty interesting because not only does it have the information here, you can display the film you're using, like the old days, sliding the corner of the box or the back flap of the box onto it, like you did in a film camera, but here it's showing up virtually, obviously. And the LCD screen does flip down and you do have a preview, so it's there, don't worry about that. Really interesting stuff. They did announce the classic negative of simulated film, which is awesome. The one thing that people don't know about Fuji is the film simulation is that they are a film company, and the people who calibrated their actual analog film are the same people that calibrated their digital profiles for the film simulation, so it's super tight and cohesive. And Fuji has done some beautiful films over the years. I love Acros, love Velvia when I underexpose it a little bit. The Riala was a great film I'm pretty sure they still make Reala. Someone down there is going to jump on me on the comments like, yeah, they still make it. They're trying to keep the tradition of the photography feel alive in their cameras. They're not just computers with lenses, but they have the dials, they're tangible controls, you know, the real spirit of what it was like shooting with film cameras, but just happen to be in high quality digital, which is super, super interesting. Really cool announcement. We're going to hear more about it later this month. So along with that, the Photographer did a pretty interesting article here where they say 5 ways the Fujifilm X-Pro 3 hints at what the next X100 camera could be like, which is pretty interesting, right? So usually what we see is the flagshipy cameras get these huge updates, and then what they can kind of minimize and crush into cameras that trickle down a little bit is what we see coming forward. So that's usually how camera companies do it. It's like, here's our awesomest stuff, and then later on we can have it in this one too. And then here's our awesome stuff, and then here's another update to that. So they're basically giving you their perceived timeline or what you think is going to happen to the Fuji line. And the Fuji X100F is a fantastic camera. I have one right there. I always carry it with me on the road. I always set it to Acros. I love that. It's a fantastic camera. Leaf shutter. I mean, you have to worry about flash sync and stuff like that. I even did a TTL video on my channel using that and one strobe. And if you're interested in learning about TTL, you can check out my YouTube channel. But in the last bit of Fuji news, Fuji scraps the 33mm f1 and they are going to make it a 50mm instead. So here's what it looks like. This was the wide angle. This was the 33mm, this big one, and it was going to weigh close to 4 pounds, if not more. And they said, well, if we just make it a 50mm, it will be way less cumbersome. And in fact, they said they probably could have made the 33mm smaller, but they would have sacrificed image quality, and who wants that? A 50mm, however, will be like a 75mm if you equate it to what it would be in full frame. Still pretty cool. F1, still awesome. You know, when companies know when to give up on things and focus their resources elsewhere, that's always a plus for us. I mean, Nikon's been working on that 095 NOC for how long already, and we're just, okay, it's, you know, I don't know, $11,000 lens. So here's some news. If you've been living under a rock, you don't know that Adorama is in the gaming world now. So we have a Twitch channel, Adorama XP, but aside from that, they're carrying consoles. So check this out, the new Switch Lite just dropped, and boom, here it is. So the Switch Lite is the next Nintendo Switch, and the Switch, of course, is their flagship console right now. And what exactly is the thing? So it's a Switch that doesn't switch. It's all one unit. It's a handheld. It's no longer like a console. It doesn't remove the Joy-Cons. It is smaller. It does not output a video signal, so you can't dock it and put it onto a screen or to a projector. Like, it's a handheld unit. What you gain is, since it's smaller, it's easier to carry around. It's less money, which is great. So if you have a family that has a few kids in it, you have to buy like 3 Switches. You can get a Switch Lite in there and kind of mitigate things. Also, since it's smaller, the screen with the resolution appears to be a little bit nicer and sharper and things like that. So I'm hearing, I haven't had it in my hands yet. I'm waiting to get back to New York to get it in my hands. Comes in yellow, gray, and turquoise, very stylish colors. I'm pretty excited about this. One of the things that's really cool about it is the battery life. So it's got 3 to 7 hours and battery life, and you might think that's like a wide gamut, but the original Nintendo Switch has a notoriously bad battery life, and they actually put out a newer version of it to have an extended battery life, which, by the way, if you bought it after July 17th, you can get Nintendo to replace your Nintendo Switch with the new one. But this Nintendo Switch Lite, with the better battery and the smaller screen and stuff like that, less taxing things about it. If you're playing something heavy like Breath of the Wild or the soon-to-be Witcher 3 or whatever on Switch, it's going to eat up your battery a lot. But if you're playing something like Doom or Tetris or whatever, you could stretch it to 7 hours, which is pretty interesting. And there's also, let me show you this. Over here, the big deal, an actual D-pad for all real gamers. You know what I'm talking about right there. The other Switch has a separated D-pad, but it's not really that, man, it's kind of like mirror, but it's still usable. And the last bit of gear news I'm going to leave you with is Sekonic still exists, and they've got a new firmware for a light meter, says the Photographer. So what does this mean? Well, this monster light meter that they make, the C800U, which is designed to create lighting systems, honestly, has TM30 mode. And what TM30 mode is really interesting. So we usually go by CRI, which is based off of 8-color gamut. This is based off of 99-color gamut, which is more accurate and more relevant to whatever you're shooting. SSI is another way to put it. This is really awesome to see, finally, not just like numbers that brands can like skew to be like, our lights are 90 plus CRI, but what does that even mean? It doesn't mean much, actually. It's kind of like a small spectrum that doesn't give you the whole story. This actually gives you more of the whole story. I had an hour-long conversation with Sekonic about this, and it was, my brain was on fire after that one. But if you're someone that doesn't understand why you need a light meter, these are the kind of the reasons, and we're getting closer and closer to like needing things faster and faster in camera. So when you can actually get your lights right and calibrated right there instead of needing post, this is one of those reasons, or be able to meter all your lights separately and being able to make them work cohesively together. This C800U, if you own it, you know, but you could be in fluorescent lighting and take a meter reading and it'll say, you need this exact gel to change that light to be neutralized, and here's how much light you're gonna lose from it, and things like that's important. Actual lighting techs need these kind of things, and even though this is like the highest end of it, seeing it in consumer level stuff like the 358 or whatever is gonna, the 458 I should say, I have the 358 sitting right there, it's from years ago, but they have the 458 now. Anyway, you see Daniel using light meters every time he goes live. You see Gavin using light meters in every video. You see me do light meter videos. I mean, we have it on Adorama's IGTV, on my own YouTube channel. Plenty of places that we show why light meters are that great, especially when working with mixed sources like ambient and strobe, or, well, this isn't strobe, but, or LEDs mixing with tungsten, all sorts of stuff like that. So let's go into this one. I'm gonna leave you with, I want to leave you with like a high note, and I think one of the best ways to leave photographers is with an inspirational look at other work. And what's more inspirational than winning photos? The 2019 APA Awards, these are the winners. I mean, such great images, and you can't help but like look at stuff like this, whatever genre you shoot, and just get psyched on the geometrics, the colors, the framing, compositions, the moments, the styles, the things that you probably wouldn't normally think off the bat, right there, right. I mean, look at this, celebrity portraits, all sorts of stuff. So I urge you to go check that out. It's a lot of fun, and I really like getting people jazzed up on when we end these things. So having said all that, we're going to leave this with the question week, which I probably said already in the beginning. Where is the line for us as photographers? Where do we stop being observers and start being participants in the scenes that we're shooting? I mean, we just saw some guy save a poor kid from being attacked at a protest. Is that the line for you? Do you need someone to be in danger? Tell me where it is for you. Some people might think like, oh, I'm a street photographer, but I like to set things up and make it the shot that I want rather than the shot that I'm looking for. Let me know what the line is for you. I'm really curious about that. Write me a comment down below. And remember, kids, the comments is a forum. You guys can write back to each other. It's not just about me and you, it's about everybody. And I really want to make Rewind a communal show that down in the comments, you guys can be like there every week talking to each other and build like virtual relationships and bounce ideas off each other as well. So please respond to each other. It's always really cool to see how you guys all interact. As needless to say, hit like, share this video around. We're almost at 1 million subscribers, which is pretty amazing. You guys are 1 in a million. Hit the bell also so you get notified when these videos come out. And don't forget to check out IBC days 1, 2, 3, and 4 from Amsterdam last week. It's really cool to see what's going on out there in the industry, even if you think it's out of your price range or not for you, just to see the technology that exists, because soon that technology will trickle down into consumer level as well, and they'll come out with something even crazier. So it's like looking into the future. It's pretty cool. Thank you for anyone who saw those videos and left a comment. Go check them out. All right, I'm gonna get out of here. Thanks for joining me here in London. The next time you see me, we'll be back at home base in New York. I'll be home again, which will be great. But till then, be good to each other. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.